This is the notebook that I usually use. It's a fairly standard composition book. The brand is Top Flight, but rather than a regular ruled one, this is quad ruled, so it's got these little graph squares, and it's 4 squares to an inch, so every square is 1/4 of an inch, which makes it really easy for measuring things out and using as a guideline to draw out boxes and calendars and all of that sort of thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is plan out what I want to go where. I usually number my pages. I only bother to number the right side pages, number them in the bottom right. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to count off the number of pages that I want for each particular thing, and I use small sticky notes to indicate where I want each section to begin. So I'm going to count off the number of pages that I want, and I'm going to indicate where January's calendar is going to go, and then February's calendar, and March's calendar, and so on, and then when I get to the goals section, and that sort of thing. So here you can see where I've gone through and counted off and made notes for myself of which ones that I want. The second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go online, or I'm going to go into my computer's calendar, and I'm going to make a note of what first of all, how many days are in that month, which you probably technically know, but it's easier to have it written down when you're trying to work through a number of months so you don't make mistakes. And then also I'm going to make note for myself from the computer's calendar of what day of the week that month starts and ends on. And this is going to come in handy in a few minutes when we start to draw out the calendars for the month. It'll just make it really easy to make sure that you create the calendar properly and don't make just silly careless errors because you're trying to jump back and forth between 30-day months and 31-day months and what starts on what day of the week. So here I'm going to start drawing out my calendar. I start from just outside of the spine, and I'm going to make a little dot where I want the corner to start, and then I'm going to count over. I do 5 by 5 boxes for each day, 5 squares by 5 squares, so 1 1/4 inch, and I'm just going to count over 5 squares and make a dot, and then 5 squares and make a dot, and 5 squares to make a dot, and that helps me know what are the boundaries of where I'm going to draw these out. Now you can see I'm counting upward, so I'm going to have 4 days on the left and 3 days on the right and 5 rows. So now I'm counting upward to get those 5 rows. And this is just the easiest way for me to mark out where those squares are going to go without making too many mistakes or making larger marks that are more difficult to conceal if I made a mistake. And now I'm double checking my counting, and we're going to move on to the right. So again, I'm going to make a dot just outside the spine area. I'm going to count over 5 squares and make a dot, count over another 5 squares and make a dot, and double check the counting here. And then we're counting up and making a dot, and now I've marked the boundaries. So this sounds a lot more complicated than it really is. After doing this a number of times, I found this is the simplest way to do this. And you're seeing all of this in real time because I want you to have a good idea of how long this takes. So almost everything in this video is in real time, unless there, with a couple exceptions that I'll note, you can see if I've decided to speed through something. So now I'm just drawing those actual lines based on where I've made the dots. It's easier to get straight lines when you do this if instead of, you don't want to just move your hand, you want to kind of slide your whole forearm across. And that will enable you to get a nice smooth line all the way across. It's also easier sometimes if you turn this, you rotate it farther sideways. I haven't rotated it quite as far in this video because I'm trying my best to stay in frame for you so that you can see what I'm doing, but it's really not too bad to draw these out. And here you can see that across the top, I also make an extra line across, just 1 square above, and that's going to give us a place where we can write in the days of the week. I prefer to do these horizontal lines first. There's a reason for that. It's not super important depending on which factors are important to you. I like to leave, when there are days at the beginning of the month or the end of the month that kind of aren't used on the calendar, I prefer to keep those all together as a single block so that there's space there that I could decorate if I wanted to, or write in a scripture verse or something like that. And you can do that if you do the horizontal lines first and then only draw in the vertical lines that you need. But if that's not important to you, you could easily just mark the whole grid of 5 by 5 squares and then only number the ones that you need. So here I'm just finishing off the outside edges of the calendar, and then we're going to begin to mark in the days. So I'm going to pull my sticky note back in so that I can see where I've made my note of which day of the week things start on. And I'm going to write in my dates, my weekday labels, so that I know which columns are which. And I prefer for my weeks to start on Monday because that keeps the weekends together. I've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday all together in one spot on the calendar. If yours starts on Sunday, that's fine. Just do what you want. But you can see now I have labeled those days of the week. So now I'm referencing my note and I'm looking to see where is day 1. And it looks like that's going to be on a Wednesday this particular month. So my first line on that first row is just going to block off Wednesday. So there's that 2 square block at the top, and then I'm going to count down to where the end of the month is. Again, based on my note, I've made a note of how many days of the month there are, and I'm going to make my final vertical line where that needs to be. So now I have a 2 square block at the top left and a 2 square block at the top right that I don't need for this month, and I've left them intact. And then I can go in and fill in the rest of these vertical lines to block off the rest of the days. So see, this next one is only going to go up as far as that first line. It's not going to go all the way up to the very top of the calendar block. See right here? Stop right there. And one more final line here. And then the only thing left to do is to fill in the rest of these numbers. And again, you've got options here. I number mine in the upper left. You could choose any corner you want. I guess if you really wanted to, you could number them right in the middle of the block, although I don't really know why you would want to do that. I number mine in the top left because that enables me to put holidays at the bottom. It also enables me sometimes to flag important dates in the upper right, but I can still kind of see what I'm doing here. So we just finish filling in the numbers here for the dates of January, and then we'll be ready to go on to the second month. So there we go. January is finished. And you can see I've got that extra space at the top and the bottom all together. I've chosen to not block it out in length, and then I can go back and I can check that I started and ended on the right date. And then again, we're going to go to the next month. You can see I kind of sort of started that one a little bit ahead of time, but after counting it off, I'm just going to go and I'm going to draw in all of these horizontal lines. And because I have 4 days on the left and 3 days on the right, that leaves a little bit of extra space down the right hand side if you want to make notes. Maybe you want to write in a list of holidays there, or a to-do list, or maybe if your goal list is brief, you want to put your goals there, whatever you want. There's a little bit of extra space on the right. There's some space, because of the way that I have laid out the whole overall thing, there's some additional space at the left and the right margins on all of the pages, and that way if you wanted to, you could decorate it. Whether maybe if you're artsy, you want to draw up the edges. I'm not, so I don't do a lot of drawing. You could use washi tape or stickers, or if you are a stamper, you could use stamps. You can write scripture verses down the sides, and it gives you some space so that if you wanted to be a little bit more creative with those edges, you have the space to do the creativity. That's not something that I'm very good at, but I'm trying to grow in that. So I don't use that space very often, but I like to have that space set aside so that I have the option if I wanted to use it. And so here again, we've drawn the overall box and we've done the horizontal lines, and now I've looked to see what day of the week the month starts on and blocked that off, and I'm counting out the rest of the days to see where the month ends. And I believe that I'm going to try to show you on this one, although I didn't do a very good job of keeping it in frame, what I do when the month overflows that last week, how I handle that sort of extra day at the end. So we're going to go ahead and mark in the rest of these vertical lines and divvy up the date that we have full squares for. And then I'm going to work on continuing to number these dates. And as you can see, this particular month started on the very last day of my calendar week. And so I think we're going to run out when we get to the very end of these blocks. And we're going to have to come back to the beginning of that last week. Coming up on the very end here. And then, yes, it looks like we have one more. So I am going to draw a diagonal line across Monday here. And I've numbered it. You can't see, but I've numbered that one in the bottom right. And this is the pen that I use, that I've been using to write in these dates. It's a Papermate Flare. I believe that's called a medium, which is pretty much their standard. It's really nice. It's a felt tip pen. It works kind of like a marker, but I don't get bleed through with these, even though the paper is thin. And then we're just going to go through, now that the calendars are all done, and just double check that everything has the right number of days of the month, and that I've started it on the right day of the week and ended on the right day of the week. Because you don't want to go into your whole year with one of your calendars wrong. And believe me, I've made some goofs on occasion. So it's just good to go through, take a couple minutes, flip through, double check from your notes. We're going to speed through here because you don't need to see me doing all of that in real time. And we're just double checking to make sure that all of the months have the right number of days and start and end on the correct days of the week, so that we know that our monthly calendars are accurate. And again, very last one, December, I'm going to check we've started and ended on the proper days of the week, and the calendar is done. Now, this step is optional, and you can do this in any order that you want. But after trying my calendar out in this style the first year, I decided it'd be a little bit more fun to add some color. So what I'm going to do is I am going to decorate the covers, and I'm going to decorate the front page for each month with decorative paper. And so, like I said, I'm not very artsy, so all I did is I got printed pattern paper and I cut it to size, and I'm just going to glue it on with a glue stick. Now, I did discover, I had forgotten this from last time, it actually works better if you cut your paper a little bit larger than what you need and line it up from the center, like the spine area, and then out, and then trim off the excess, because I cut mine exactly the right size this time. I thought exactly the right size, and it was really difficult to try to get them lined up straight. So I would recommend that you actually cut these a little bit oversized. So I have a scrap piece of paper here that I've laid underneath the page that I'm gluing to, and I'm going to make sure I run my glue stick really well right along the edge of the page, so that's stuck really well, and then just kind of scribble glue across the rest of the page. Your glue needs to be even along the edges. It doesn't have to be perfect along the inside. And then just glue this paper in. Another thing that I discovered, the last time I did this, I used kind of a cheaper paper, and it was sort of thin, like a kind of a heavy printer paper weight, and that worked really well for this because it flexes along with the paper that's actually, built into the composition notebook. The paper that I used this time, the pattern paper, was a little bit of a nicer pattern paper. It's heavier, almost more approaching like a cardstock. And it doesn't actually work as well for this, even though it's technically nicer paper, because it's so stiff that after a while, the edges that are kind of in toward the spine of the book don't flex as well with the thinner pages from the composition notebook paper. And it kind of wants to stick out and catch a little bit. So if you're still in the stage of picking out your paper, I would recommend that you look for one that's thinner, because that tends to work better. So we're just going to do this same thing all the way through. I'm going to the front of each section that I had dedicated to a calendar, and I'm going to run my glue stick along the 3 outer edges and then up the spine area and scribble it across. And then I'm going to stick my patterned paper down, flip it over to the other side and smooth it down really nice, and you know, get all those bubbles out that you can and whatnot. And I've just done this through all of the pages. Again, you know, use a piece of scrap paper. I just have a piece of notebook paper. Put scrap paper under the edge so that when you run your glue stick along the edges, you're not gluing all the pages of your notebook together. Flip it over, smooth out the bubbles, move on to the next one. This is fairly self-explanatory. And I think that here in a moment we're going to speed this up, because you really probably don't need to see me add glue in real time. You kind of have the idea of what we're doing here. Glue along the edges. And I'm not using anything fancy here in terms of adhesive. This is just your plain old, like, Elmer's glue stick. I don't know if you can see it up there. I have a baby wipe tucked away up in the corner so that if my fingers get too sticky gluey, I can wipe them off. You don't have to use patterned paper for this. You don't have to do this at all. You can just leave these blank. It works just fine. The first year that I had my planner set up in a composition notebook like this, I didn't decorate anything inside, and that was fine. It works just fine. But if you know that this setup works well for you, it's kind of fun to have that pop of color in there. And you could draw on those pages if you wanted. You could glue in plain white paper and you could decorate that. You could print something off from your printer. I just find it simplest and easiest to just buy patterned paper. And when we're done gluing that to all of these month pages, then we're going to move on, and we're going to also add some patterned paper to the front and the covers of the book, and we're going to make some pockets toward the front and the back. So we're going to do all of these papery things all in one step. Now, you could do this before you draw your calendars. I thought that it might be easier to draw the calendars without the added bulk of the paper in there, so I opted to draw my calendars first and then add all of this paper. But you could totally do all of your decorating first. It doesn't matter. A lot of the things that I'm going to show you, you could do the sections, most of them, in any order that you want. So here I'm just flipping through and I'm showing you where I have all of these pages in. I've run my finger along it because a couple places there's a little bit of overflow of glue and the pages were sticking together, so I'm just freeing those up. And now we're going to move on. I'm doing the inside cover here, and it's exactly the same thing. I've got paper cut to the same size, just like before, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to slide a piece of scrap paper underneath, and I'm going to run glue around the edges, and I'm going to scribble glue across the middle of it, and we're going to stick a piece of paper on there. So here comes my scrap paper and glue stick. Run glue neatly along the top and the bottom edges. Now, the paper that I'm going to use for this is kind of a glossy paper, and it had a harder time sticking. So again, if you're still in the process of choosing your paper that's not slick and not shiny will stick better to the glue. Just kind of the cheapest paper you can find works best. And here my glue stick has run out, and we're going to have to go get a new one. Back with a new glue stick. I'm going to run this along the edges one more time, just in case the glue that I put on there before I went to get the new glue stick has dried out. And scribble it across the middle here. And then we're gonna lay the paper in place. Now, because the cover is a little bit stiffer, I was able to put this a little bit more upright and use my fingers to kind of line it up square to the outside edges of the book. And I'm just going to smooth this down really well. Got a little extra sticky on there from my fingers. I'm just going to smooth this down really well to make sure that it's stuck. And then press it down, flip it over to the other side, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side of the cover. Now you could do this as well on the outside of the front cover. I did not decorate the outside of mine this way because I thought I might come back and decorate the outside in some other fashion. You'll see a little bit more about that toward the end of the video, but right now I'm just decorating the insides of the book. And this is kind of nice, particularly on these inside covers. These particular composition notebooks have those sort of reference guides that you might use for school or whatnot, and I don't need length measurement conversions and that kind of thing on the inside of my daily planner, so I'm going to make use of this pretty paper instead. And again, just smooth it down, press along the edges and make sure that it's nice and tightly adhered along the edges, and then rub it down flat. And then I'm going to close up the book and give it another good press. So now all of the regular pages that I want to be covered are covered. And we're going to move on and we're going to make some pockets at the front and the back of the book. So it's going to take a total of 4 pages at the front of the book to make this pocket. So we're going to grab the first 2 and take these 2 pages together. Save the other 2 for a moment. We're going to take the first 2 pages together and we're going to fold them down into a triangle. Now you don't want to fold them all the way totally flat against the spine, or this gets a little bit tricky to do, but you can do it just a couple of squares away, or if you want the top of your pocket to be a little bit wider, you can do it a little bit farther. And we're just going to glue those folded corners down. You don't have to glue this perfectly because we're going to cover this up, but it helps to have a little bit of glue there just to kind of hold it in place where you want it. So I've glued the overall fold down, and then that second piece I'm also gluing so that it won't sort of flap up. Make sure that your glue is good and stuck, and flip that over. And then those next 2 pages we're going to do the same thing with. We're going to hold the 2 pages together and we're going to fold them down in a V, and we're going to fold them making sure that they match up with the angle of the first 2 pages that we folded down. So again, we're going to fold them in toward the spine so that there's an angle at the outside of the pages, but the part that's closest to the spine is just straight. And then again, we're just going to throw a little bit of glue stick down there and glue those flaps so that they stay put and they're not flapping all over the place. I had a little bit of trouble getting these corners to pull back up so that I could get the glue underneath. Just glue those down. And now what you should have is you should have 2 pairs of pages back to back, and each pair of pages should have the corners folded to the outside of where those 2 would come together. And then we're going to flip to the back and we're going to do the exact same thing on the back of the book. So take the last 2 pages toward the back of the book and we're going to fold those in toward the spine at an angle so that you it looks like you cut off the top outer corner of the page at an angle. I'm going to use a little bit of glue stick to just fold those down so they stay in place and aren't flapping around. Press it down well. And then you're going to move to the next 2 sheets from the back, and holding them together, fold them in toward the spine at an angle so that that outer angle matches the angle that you just created with the previous 2 sheets. And again, grab your glue stick and tack it down so that those pages don't just flutter and flap about and get in your way. And now that you have these folded into the shape that you want, and they're tacked down with a little bit of glue so that they don't get all over everywhere, we're going to cover these pages with paper too, the same way that we did the front of the months and the inside of the pages. So let's flip back to the front of the book. We're going to move from front to back as usual. I'm going to pull out the paper that I've chosen for this, which is cut to the same size as my other sheets. And I think I'm digging around in here for my scrap piece of paper so that I have something for my gluing. And now we're going to lift just the front pair. So make sure they're separated, and lift just that front pair and slip your gluey scrap piece underneath. And then, just like you did for the other pages, with the exception that this one has an angle to it, you're going to run your glue stick well along the edges of the page, and then some scribbly places across the middle, and we're going to glue the paper, the decorative paper, right onto the page. So I'm trying to be careful to line this up straight and press the paper on, and then folded it over the other side to make sure that I can glue that angled edge really well and not be gluing it to my scrap paper. I'm wiping off a little bit of excess glue along the edge so that I don't accidentally glue pages together I don't want to be. And then we're going to take the right flap that's going to be part of our pocket and flip it over and slide the scrap paper underneath, and we're going to do exactly the same thing again. Glue along the inside edge and glue along the outside edges, and scribble some reasonable coverage of glue across the middle. And then once again, we're going to attach our decorative paper. Smooth it on. Flip it over so that you can really press down those edges well, especially along that angle, so that we've got it really tightly adhered. And so you have now covered the inside and the outside of that front pocket. Now grab your scissors, and we're just going to trim the excess off along that angle. So you have this whole kind of upper triangle where you have decorative paper and you don't have page because you folded it over. We're going to cut that off. And we're going to cut that off on both sides. I've pressed down on it again just to make sure I didn't pull any of the glue loose as I did that. You'll see me fumble with this one a little bit because I thought that it would be easier to cut it from right to left with the book itself to my left, except because I'm working from the binding area, I found that that didn't work very well. So I'm actually going to turn this around. I'm going to do this the other way. There you can see I've flipped it around. I've decided that cutting from the outside of the page in toward the spine definitely works more easily, regardless of which direction that means that which side the book means it is to my scissors. And smooth down again along that cut edge to make sure that I haven't cut anything. And so you can see we now have a left and a right flap for the pocket. The pocket's not done. We'll come back to the pocket stage later, but right now we're just doing the paper part. But we're going to flip over to the back of the book and we're going to do exactly the same thing on this back pocket that we did on the front pocket. So again, front flap of the pocket, slip some scrap paper behind it, glue along the spine, glue along all of the outer edges of the page, scribble some glue all along the inner area of the page, and here comes our decorative paper. Line it up, press it down really well. Turn it over so that we can really press it down well, especially along that folded edge. And then flip over to the other side of the pocket and insert our scrap paper underneath. Glue along the spine. And glue along all of those outer edges. And scribble some glue along all of the inner area of the page. And grab our decorative paper, line it up, and press it down to adhere. Again, I like to flip these over to the inside, especially because it enables me to smooth out and press down right along that folded edge so that we can make sure that that folded edge is very well glued. And then grab your scissors and trim off the upper corners from the decorative paper so that the shape of the decorative paper that we've attached matches the shape of the pocket flap. We're going to cut that second one off. Try not to cut the edge of the page that you actually folded. You want to be cutting just outside the folded edge. And that helps keep you from having any awkward rough edges there. So there we go. We have all of our paper, all the decorative paper attached to everything, and I've pressed mine I put it under a heavy book and let it sit for a couple hours to overnight just to make sure that all of the pages that I glued in are glued really, really well. And now we're going to go in with a pair of scissors and we're going to trim off any of the excess around the edges of the pages. Now you may have more excess if you do it the way that I recommended and actually cut your paper a little larger than you needed it to be, whereas instead of, like, I cut mine, I thought exactly to size, and then some of them went on slightly crooked, so I've got kind of some ucky edges to deal with. If you cut it about half an inch too big all around, you're going to have more to trim off, but you're going to have an easier time getting it lined up straight, and you're going to have probably neater edges. But just take a few minutes and take your scissors, and you're just going to go around all of the places that you glued on decorative paper and cut off any of these excess edges that are sticking out beyond the edges of the book. And I apologize that some of these went a little bit off screen, but you can get the general idea of what I have going on here. So I've started by cutting off the excess edges around the outsides of what is the book itself, the pieces that I glued to the inside cover. And you may not get these all exactly perfect, especially when you get in really close to the spine. Sometimes it's hard to get your scissors in there. That's fine. This doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. You just want to not have a bunch of extra pieces sticking out everywhere in all directions that kind of make it hard to see the book evenly as you're flipping through it later. I'm cutting the rest of the top edge here that you can't see because I've lifted it up so it's now gone off screen. the very last of this edge, I think. So now you can see that the inside edge there is a little bit more even of the piece that's part of the book itself. And now I'm going to trim the excess along the bottom edges of my pockets. That's extending down beyond the book. And that was actually pretty simple to hold the two sides of the pocket together and trim them all together as one. This part is a little bit boring to watch, but I'm just doing the same thing. I'm kind of flipping through month by month, looking to see, do I have any excess sticking out. Some of them it's easier to tell than others because some of my paper was white on the back and some of it wasn't. With these interior pages, I also have chosen to use a corner rounder. That's what this is. It's like a hole punch, but it just rounds corners. And I'm going to punch these so that they're rounded to match the rounding of the pages that actually come in the book. You don't have to do this. I use my corner rounder a lot, so I have one and it makes sense for me to have one. If you do not have a corner rounder, you don't have to do that. You can use your scissors and round the corners to match as best you can, or you can just leave them square. That's totally fine too. But like I said, I use my corner rounder all the time, so I like to trim off the edges here and then use my corner rounder to punch a corner to match the shape of the original book itself. So I think I'm going to show you one or two more of these, and then I believe we're going to speed the video up here so that you can see me doing this. You see me work my way through the book, but you don't have to watch it in real time, which is a little bit tedious for just watching. So you just slip the corner rounder on and just punch. It's super quick and easy. And if I can find it again, I will link the corner rounder that I used in the description box below. And here we're just going to speed through the rest of the months, trimming off any excess and punching those corners. This can be a good project to do while you watch TV or watch YouTube videos or listen to a podcast or something like that, because this is kind of mindless work. You don't have to think through. Unlike drawing your calendars where you kind of want to be concentrating on what you're doing so that you get the dates right, this is pretty mindless work. You just have to be able to use your hands. So we'll finish trimming all of these edges. Rounding all of these corners. And I think we have worked our way all the way back. We're working backward here. I think we've worked our way all the way back from December, and we are now finally at January. So we're finishing up here. Trim those final edges off. And round these final corners. And then I have, this is a page, I am not sure if I showed you gluing this page. I glued one additional piece of decorative paper after the page I call my index to what I call, this page I call my dashboard. And all I do with this dashboard, it's a blank page, and I put a large sticky note on there, and that's the place that I jot down notes and things that I know need to be transferred to my computer or something later, but I don't have time. And that way I can, when it gets filled up, just peel that sticky note off and throw it away and pop a new one in. So I've trimmed the edges off of that page as well and rounded the corners. And now I am rounding the corners on my pocket pages, and I believe that that is going to finish up the trimming. So I flip back over to the other side and round the corners of this last couple pocket pages. And now we are finished with the trimming and the evening out. I rearrange my desk space here. This is not normally where I would do this. I have a little lap desk set up for the filming here, so I'm used to spreading out a little bit farther, maybe even on the floor. I've got stuff falling all over the place here, so apologize as I resituate myself. Show you all of the parts and don't forget anything. So now we're going to look at tabs. Now, what I used to do is use one of these commercially made tabs and open it up and just trace it onto the back of my decorative paper. This is a really good option if you're just working with limited supplies. You don't need anything fancy. You would need one of these store-bought tabs, or maybe a tab that you tore off of something else, and you need a pencil and scissors, and that's it. It's just nothing fancy. So I would trace these onto the paper, and then I would just cut it out, and then I would put glue stick on the back of it and glue that onto my page. That's what I did the first couple of years that I had this. But I happen to have a die cutting machine, and so I now have a set of tab dies, and that's what I'm using now. Is I'm using these tab dies, and I just die cut my tabs. So if you have a die cutting machine, that is an option, but they are not necessary. And these are all my little tabs that I've cut for my months, and then I have a slightly wider tab, a couple of them that I've cut for other sections of the book. And this is a sticker maker from a company called Xyron. This is what I prefer to use. Again, this is not necessary. You can totally use glue, but I find this is what works the best. It's a sticker making machine. I just take the tabs, you put them in this side, and then you crank this crank, and it should roll them through, and they'll come out the other side. And what it does is it's going to add adhesive to the back, and it basically turns them into stickers, and that's the easiest way to do this in my experience. You can see I'm having a little bit of trouble with my machine this time. I'm fidgeting with it. They're not wanting to go through, and right about here I'm going to find out that's because it's out of adhesive. So we are going to set this aside, and we're going to go back to doing this more the old-fashioned way, and I'm going to try to just do this with a glue stick. So I've pulled out a little scrap of paper here to do my gluing on, and pulled the book out. You can see that I set it up sideways. This is the way I'd hear my tabs, is I turn the book sideways to myself. Go ahead and fold the tab first and then unfold it, because it's easier to fold it. It's easier to get it to crease before you've added glue to it. And then I'm just going to put glue all over the back of this tab. Then pick the tab up, and I'm going to flip to the page that I wanted to attach it to. You're not going to be able to see this very well. I'm really sorry because of the angle that I had to be at to the camera. But this graph paper comes in really handy because I use the grids to line it up. So first I'm going to kind of look and see how many grids down I want this to start. And I'm going to line the back of my tab up to the appropriate square on the graph paper. And then hold that in place and fold the other side of the tab over to the front and hold it in place. And what I'm going to discover really quickly is that the glue from the glue stick is not drying fast enough, far enough, and so my tabs are sliding around. So you're going to see here in a moment, I'm going to switch over and I'm going to go grab some liquid glue. My liquid glue is liquid glue from Barely Arts, because that's what I use for my card making, so it's what I had handy. You do not have to use that. Just plain old Elmer's glue would work just fine. But I did find that the liquid glue was working better than the glue stick, although you do still have to hold on to it for a moment to make sure it's kind of starting to get stuck, or else it also slips. So if you have the option to do more of a double-sided adhesive type thing, that really works better. But if you have to use regular glue, liquid glue works better than glue stick. So here I'm moved on to the next month's tab, and I'm applying my glue, and I'm going to lift up the previous month and this month together first, because I'm going to look to see at what square my last tab ends to give me an idea of which square I want to line the new tab up to. And I'm going to line that up. And then I'm going to separate back out to where I'm only holding on to that month's page, and flip that tab over and hold it on. And here you can see the glue slipped right off. So I'm going to line that back up and pinch it shut. And hold that closed a little bit longer to make sure that I've given that liquid glue a chance to grab hold. And once it's started to get hold and it's not sliding around so much anymore, then I'll drop that page and we'll move on to the next one. So I'm going to flip over to March and find my March tab. Make sure it's knowing where to fold. Add my glue on the back. And then we're going to lift this up along with the month before it and use the previous tab to line up the new tab. And once I've got that in place, I'm going to drop the previous pages and get it lined up and flip this over. Now, an advantage to the liquid glue is that it does give you time that you can move it around a little bit if you need to. Of course, the downside then is it continues to move around maybe a little bit longer than you want it to. So I'm going to make sure I've held this really firmly in place for a good solid few seconds. Give it a chance to grab hold, and then we're going to move on to the next one. And we are going to speed through most of the rest of these tabs because, once again, you don't need to see me do this in real time. It's the same thing over and over again. So we're going to do the same thing every time. Lift the next page along with the last one. Use the previous tab to figure out where we want the new tab to line up. Get it lined up. Flip it over and fold it over. Glue it in place. Hold it long enough that the glue can grab. Move on to the next one. Same thing over and over again. You kind of get in a groove. Unfortunately, it doesn't go quite as quickly as we have the video moving through it right now, but it does go fairly quickly. And again, this is something that you can do while you're watching TV or watching YouTube videos or listening to a podcast or something like that, because there's not really a lot of mental effort involved in attaching these tabs. So we're going to move on to these last few tabs. October, November, and December, last month's tab. Line it up, fold it over, and hold it firmly for a few seconds so that it can grip. Now this goes a little bit faster if you have kind of the double-sided adhesive or something, because you don't have to give it this extra time to attach. Once you've flipped it over and stuck it, it's stuck, and that's that. So here you can see I've got 12 months of tabs. Makes it really easy to find my months at a glance throughout the year as I'm working with it. And now we're going to finish our pockets. So for this, you're going to need some washi tape. Preferably, you could use some other kind of tape if you don't have washi, but I like to use washi tape for this. So we're going to tape, first of all, only the front side of the pocket. So you're going to grab your washi tape and stretch it out to find how much tape you need to cover that top angled edge of your front pocket. So I'm going to measure that out and then cut it to size. And then lay that washi tape along the front top angled edge of the front of your pocket with about half of it attached to the pocket. So you want it to be about halfway on and halfway extending off, because then what you're going to do is you're going to open up the pocket and you're going to fold that washi tape over. So we're kind of sealing in just that top angled edge of just the front page of the pocket. So fold that washi tape over and get it pressed down really well, and you should have kind of an angled, sealed, trimmed edge of that pocket. And then you're going to flip over to the back page and you're going to do exactly the same thing. Measure out how much washi tape you need to cover that top angled edge. And then adhere it to the top angled edge about with half the width on the page and half the width extending beyond the page. And then open the pocket up and fold that washi tape over toward the inside of the pocket so that we're sealing in that top angled edge of the back side of the pocket. So now you should have the top angled edge of both the front and the back separately taped. And then we're going to do the same thing along the outside side edge of the pocket, which should be fairly short. So again, you're going to measure your washi tape to the side edge of just the top front pocket piece, and you're going to stick your washi tape on half of the width on the page and half of the width extending off the page. And then separate the two pages of pocket. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't separate the two pages of the pocket. Hold them together, and you're going to fold that over both sides of the pocket page. So now you will have sealed the sides of the pocket. Not only, it won't be only trimming, but you will have attached the two sides together, but it should still be open at the bottom. So now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to measure how much washi tape we need to cover the bottom edge of the pocket. And once again, we're going to adhere that across the bottom edge of the pocket with half of the width of the tape on the page and half of the width off the page. And then flip it, and you're going to fold the washi tape over both sides of the pocket, the front and the back, and this is going to seal it shut. So you should have had washi tape that covered the top angled edge of only the front page, and washi tape that covered the top angled edge of only the back page. And then you should have one piece of washi tape that covered the sides of both pages together, sealing them together, and washi that covers the bottom edge of both pocket pages, again sealing them together. So it should be sealed at the bottom and the outside edge, and then that top angled edge should be open but trimmed. And we're going to flip to the back and we're going to do exactly the same thing. So again, measure how much washi tape you need to cover the top angled edge of the front pocket piece. And then open the pocket and fold your washi tape over so that it covers the top angled edge of the front piece only of the pocket page. So you should not be attaching your two pocket pages together, but only adding trim to the angled edge of the front page. And then flip the back of the pocket over and do the same thing. Once again, measure out how much washi tape you need to cover the top angled edge of your back pocket page. Then open up the pocket and fold the washi tape over so you're covering the top angled edge of the back page only of the pocket. So you're not adhering your pocket pages together at this point. You're only sealing in that top angled edge of the front and the back separately. And then close up your pocket. And now we're going to washi tape the sides of those pockets. So one strip of washi tape, half the width on the page, half the width extending beyond the page. And then we're going to hold both pocket pages together and fold that washi tape over so you will have sealed in the edge and attached the two pocket pages together. Here I've trimmed off a little bit of excess because I made my washi tape just a little too long. And then the final step of this pocket, measure out washi tape to extend the width of the page, and adhere that to the bottom edge of your pocket, half the width of the washi tape on the page and half the width of the washi tape extending beyond the bottom of the page. And then with both pocket pages together, fold that washi tape over and press it down snugly. And this should be closing up the bottom of your pocket. So the bottom of your pocket should be closed in, and the side of your pocket should be closed in, and the top angled edges should be open with washi tape just edging them. So you now have a large angled pocket in the front of your book and a large angled pocket in the back of your book. So I have this top angled pocket, front angled pocket, and then my dashboard. And then I'm going to flip through past all of these months. Flip, flip, flip past all of these monthly sections. And at the very back of the book, we also have an angled pocket. Now, there are a couple tabs we have left to add. So starting from December, I'm going to flip back again past the end of my month sections. And the next section that I have marked with my sticky notes, this is for my goals. So I am going to add one more tab on here for my goals page. And this is one of the wider tabs. So I've folded it in half, and I'm going to glue that on, and I'm going to fold my next tab, which is going to be for everything after my goals. And then I have this other little tiny tab, and that is going to indicate where my Christmas plans are. So I've taken my goals tab, and I'm now going to attach it just exactly like I did the tabs for the month pages. I'm adding some white glue to the inside of the tab. And I'm going to decide where I want this lined up. And line it up and stick it on. Fold it over. And close it up. And then remember, I have to press this firmly and hold it for a couple of seconds so that that liquid glue can hold. So this is where I would write my goals for the whole year. And I am gonna flip past. I don't remember off the top of my head if it's 4 or 6 pages. I think it's 4 pages. I'm going to flip past, and then I'm going to add another tab, and this is for the everything else that comes after, all of my other notes and anything else that I may write over the course of the year that aren't my monthly plans and aren't my annual goals. So I'm adding glue to the inside of this tab. And here you can see where I'm using the previous tab to determine where I want this lined up, which square I want to use to line it up with. And then I'm going to move that out of the way, and I'm going to line this up to the square. And then I'm going to flip that over and fold the other side of the tab down and press and hold for a few seconds so that that liquid glue has a chance to grab. And then after this, we only have one more tab, and this is a little tiny tab. I'm going to adhere this actually to the top of a page, not to the side of the page. So I am going to take the page that will be my Christmas plans, and I am going to fold it in half lengthwise. So I'm folding it in toward the spine of the book, more or less in half. It's not fully in half. You don't want to fold so that the edge is buried inside the spine of the book, or it's kind of hard to open, but kind of close. And for the moment, I'm going to open that back up for the sake of adhering this tab. And I'm going to add glue to this tab, and I'm going to attach it to the top of the page just to the left of where that fold will be. So that once I've refolded the page, that tab is going to kind of be at the outer edge. And the reason that I do my Christmas plans like this is I can now write out on the inside of this folded area, I can list the people that I have to buy gifts for and list my plans for Christmas. And if I'm flipping through this casually in front of somebody, I'm not showing off all of my gift plans. So I usually just write Christmas on the outside of this flap. It's easy for me to open up and write my plans in, but it also keeps it concealed from anybody who might flip through it at a glance or see me flip through it at a glance. So let's see what we've got. We're going to now work on writing out the index, and I'm going to speed this up a little bit because I'm not very good at decorative handwriting, and as it turns out, I was incredibly slow. So I'm going to speed up my writing of the word index to about 2 or 3 times speed, and that will give you an idea of just how slow I was at this. But all I'm doing here is labeling this first page that I think it's behind the dashboard. It's at least behind the pocket. And I am just going to label this at the top, index. And then, using those page numbers that we wrote on at the very beginning, I can make an indexed list here of where, for instance, January starts and February and March and so on. Honestly, I don't tend to use my index very much because mostly I use this book either for my monthly plans or for my goals, and they're all tabbed, so it's easy enough for me to see those at a glance. But particularly if you write a lot of information into that section that you have left at the back of the book, you may want to use your index for that. Now, this is where I'm showing you, this is my goals page. So here I'm writing in 2025 goals. I haven't made my 2025 goals yet, lest you should think that I am this on top of things. I'm not. I know what goes where in my planner, but that doesn't mean that I have all of these plans ready. So this is my 2024 goals. You can see they're at where I've placed that goals tab. And my next page, this is for my 101 things in 1001 days list. I'll be a little bit slow here, you'll see in a moment, because I have to reference my old calendar, because I'm going to write 101 things in 1001 days, and then I am going to write down the date span that was my 1001 days. And what you may notice is that this particular 1001 day period is going to end somewhere right around the middle of this year. And so for that reason, I actually have left some extra space in this book to write a new 101 things in 1001 days when that's done. And now here we get to the Christmas page. This is the one that's folded over. And I'm just going to write Christmas on the outside of this, so I know that that's what that is. Now when I open this, I will write my Christmas plans inside, but then fold it shut so that I'm the only one that can readily see it. And those are the other major sections that I put in this book. So let's give you a quick walkthrough. I write my monthly goals at the front of that calendar. And now we're going to work on marking holidays in the calendar. So first I'm going to mark birthdays and anniversaries. And what I do is I pick 2 different highlighter colors. Here you can see I've just tested to see what color I want. One for birthdays and one for anniversaries. And I am referencing a master list that I keep on hand of birthdays and anniversaries. And I am going to go add highlighting to the bottom of the date square everywhere I'm going to write in a birthday. Now, later I will go and I will write the name of the person whose birthday it is in that highlighted area. I'm not going to show you that part for the sake of the privacy of the people whose birthdays these are. But you can see that right now I'm just using my calendar to take this blue highlighter and make a highlighted band at the bottom of the box for each date anywhere on my monthly calendars where there's a birthday that goes. And you may see in a couple of places I've made my sort of highlighted bar a little bit extra thick. That's because we have a number of dates where we have 2 birthdays, and I'm going to write one in above the other, and I want to make sure that there's space. So we're going to speed up and speed through this because I am just highlighting a bunch of dates that mean nothing to you, but that's all I'm doing here is using this blue highlighter to highlight the bottom of the date box everywhere that I have a birthday to fill in. Now I'm going to come back in a moment and we're going to do the same thing for anniversaries, but we're going to do that in a different color. And I would suggest that you do it this way, that you mark all of your birthdays first and then you come back and mark all of the anniversaries. Because if you try to do it month by month, like if you try to do January and highlight all of the birthdays and anniversaries, in my experience, it's a lot easier to make a mistake and grab the wrong highlighter and highlight the wrong stuff. And not that that's the end of the world, but it can be a little bit tricky when you have highlighted the wrong color to figure out how you're going to fix that. So I find that it's easier to just have the one highlighter out at a time. I pull out my blue, I go through every month and highlight all of the birthdays. And then I'm going to put this away and pull out my anniversary color and go through and do all of the anniversaries. And that way I'm a lot less likely to goof it up and grab the wrong color and highlight the wrong thing. So here I'm pulling out to see, because these are not the same highlighters that I used last year, to see which color I want to use. And I've decided I didn't like that one and I didn't like the next one. And here's the color that I'm actually going to use. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to flip all the way back to January, and then referencing my master list, I'm going to go through and I am going to highlight at the bottom of each box where there's an anniversary in this purple color. Now if I already have a blue highlight, I'm just going to put the purple highlight right above it. And we will speed through these in a moment too. Of course, this will go a lot faster because we have fewer anniversaries than we do birthdays. But I'm just going to flip through this and we're going to highlight all of these. And what I would normally do, you'll see, I'll show you my own as an example later before I fill everything else in. But then I would just take a regular pen and I write, for the birthday, I write the person's name. And sometimes for the kids, in parentheses, I'll write either their age or their year of birth so I can calculate their age. And then for the anniversaries, I write the surname, and then in parentheses, I will write in the first name of the husband. If it's a surname we have multiples of, like if I write Ramey in, then I need to differentiate, is that me, Ramey, or is that my in-laws or something like that? So I would put Ramey Michael or Ramey M, and that would help me differentiate. And then I'm going to do holidays. So I just have a totally scribbled list here of the holidays that were important to me that I just grabbed from the internet. You don't have to make a list if you're able to sit down and do this just in front of your computer. You can work from the list on the computer. I couldn't do that while I was recording, so I scribbled down a list, and I'm going to just use that as my reference. And I have this printed sheet of holiday stickers that are print and cut on my silhouette, and I'm going to use those to mark the holidays on my calendar. Now this section of the video is going to get a little bit wonky. I was not working through them in order for some reason, month by month. I think maybe I was going through the list that I have on my paper and pulling the ones that I had stickers for or something. I'm not sure. You're also going to see me in a moment. I forgot I wasn't going month by month, and I stuck a sticker to a date in January and then realized, wait, this goes on May, and I have to peel it off and put it back on. And then partway through it, I discovered that because my silhouette hadn't been behaving very well, that not all of my stickers are cut properly, and I didn't want you to have to watch me fight with all of them. So you're going to see me stick a couple of these stickers on that will serve as an example, and then I'm going to add the rest of these stickers just completely off camera. So here you can see I'm trying to mark Memorial Day on January. And obviously Memorial Day is not in January. And now I'm going to realize, wait a minute, I forgot to flip the page before I attached that sticker. So very carefully peeling the sticker back off. And I'm going to flip to May where it's supposed to be and attach the sticker. Again, this is not necessary. I like to mark mine this way because it lets me add a little bit of color and a little bit of fun to my planner without me having to be at all artistic. But you do not have to do this. You can skip writing in holidays. You can write them in with a pen at the bottom of the calendar block, just the same way that I did birthdays. You can draw a picture yourself if you're good at doodling or whatever. It's totally up to you. I find it very simple to mark them by just sticking a sticker on, and like I said, it lets me add some color and a little bit of fun to the planner without me having to be artistic, so I like doing it this way, but it's totally up to you. Most of this stuff is completely extra. You don't have to have all of these supplies, is what I'm trying to say. You only really need a couple really basic things to make a planner setup in a composition book like this work. You need the composition book itself. You need your pens. A glue stick and washi tape and scissors are really handy but all of the other stuff, the stickers and the decorative paper and all of that, that's extra, that's a bonus. You do not have to have that. I did not use it or have it the first year, and it worked totally fine. So if you're just starting out, you can maybe skip some of this extra stuff and just try it out super basic, pared down, and see if you like this setup before you decide to go all out. Now we're moving on to the second notebook. So this is a separate composition book, and I just have some little month at a glance calendars printed out here that I made. I printed these on clear sticker paper because I like the way that looks. You don't have to. You could use white sticker paper. You could print it on regular paper and just use a glue stick. That's totally fine. But like I said, I have these. I like the way it looks, so I did it that way. I think I made these calendars because I wanted them to be a certain size to fit with the blocks in my printer, but you can just totally go online and grab a year at a glance calendar. It's easy to find one to print. And I have printed the whole year once, and then I've also printed a sheet that has only the second half of the year, because when I get midway through the year, I'm going to swap this book out for a new one. And at that point, I don't need the first half of the year at a glance. So all I'm doing right now is I am just trimming my calendars apart and trimming off all of the excess around the edges so that I have just little tiny calendars, little tiny January and a little tiny February and a little tiny March. And what this does, it gives me a year at a glance in this booklet so that if I ever wanted to take just this book with me somewhere, I have all of my dailies, all my daily pages, because that's primarily what's in this book, but I also have the year at a glance with all of the major birthdays and holidays and other dates so that I can do some planning. And again, I'm going to pull out that corner rounder that I had. Once again, this is not essential. I like punching the corners because I feel like when the corners of these stickers aren't completely square, it makes them less likely to get caught on things and lift up and peel and separate from the page. But again, totally not necessary. You don't have to do this. You could just print your month at a glance calendar on a piece of paper, cut it apart, and glue it in with a glue stick, and that would work totally fine. But I have mine printed on clear sticker paper, which I have cut apart, and now I am trimming the corners. And I'll show you here in a moment a comparison of the one with the rounded corners with one without the corners cut, just so you can see. I didn't round these corners as they're not as round, it's not as deep a curve as for the overall book, but it just takes a little bit of that sharpness off the corners so that they're not catching on things. And then I'm going to put these back in order because I've gotten them all scrambled up in the process of cutting them apart. I like to skip over the first page, but you don't have to do that. And this book is new, it hasn't been opened before, so I'm going to kind of crease the spine a little bit so I can get it to lie a little flat-ish on my desk. And January, February, March are going to go across the top of that page. Now, there are other ways you could do this too. You could attach the entire year at a glance to one page, but you will see later why I prefer to do just 3 months to a page. And I'm going to speed this up here again because I had a lot of trouble getting the backing to peel off of this. And it took me a ridiculously long amount of time to get the backing to come off of this first sticker so that I could get this, start the layout of this page. But once I finally get the backing off of this sticker, I'm going to start with the center one on that page so that I can get an idea of what spacing I want here. And so then I'm going to stick February right to that page. And make sure it's straight, and then stick it down. And then I'm going to peel the other two for this page, and using the visual space that's left, kind of just gauge where they go. You can see I'm largely eyeballing this, but I printed these calendars so that they will fit kind of inside the grids on the page, so it feels a little bit less busy to my eye than when the numbers are kind of overlapping all of the graphs on the page. So then there's January in place and February, and then we're going to go with March. Peel the backing off of here. Cutting the corners off makes it harder for the stickers to lift from the page, but it also makes it a little bit trickier for me to get this backing peeled off, because there's not exactly a corner left to poke at with my fingernails. And they're clear, so it makes it a little harder to see. So there's that last sticker for this page. We've got March, and I'm going to put that on. And then we're going to do most of the rest of this, I think, off camera, but it's the same thing. We're going to put January, February, March across that first page, and then April, May, June across the next page, and then flip. And then again, 3 months and 3 months. So we're going to have 3 months across the top of each page. There you go, just like that. March, April, May, and then I'm going to go off screen, and we've done January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and we are finishing up here with the very last one, and here is December. So I'll have a year at a glance all across the top of these. Now what I will do later is I will come back and I will list all of the important dates below each of those, which is why we've done them across the top of the page rather than putting all of these calendars on one page. We'll come back and we'll do that later. Again, I'm not going to show you all of the dates for the sake of people's privacy, but now we're going to move on and we are going to draw in the first week's daily pages. Now, be aware going into this is going to be a lot more finicky this first time. In part, I'm kind of referencing my old notebook here to look at the spacing, but it's going to be a little bit more finicky this first time, and therefore it's going to take longer this first time because we're trying to figure out where everything lines up on the page. What I usually do with mine is I draw this first week in at the beginning of the year, and that's it. And then I only draw in my daily pages a week at a time. Every Sunday evening or Monday morning I will draw in the weekly pages, and I timed it. It takes me just barely more than 3 minutes to draw in a whole week's worth of pages the way that I'm going to show you here. But you're going to see it's going to take a little bit longer here this first time because I'm trying to count everything. But once you have one in the booklet, you can just use the pages that are already in there as the reference for where the others go, and it goes a lot quicker. So I have drawn, again, there are all kinds of ways you can do this. I like this layout because it's a little bit dressed up, but it's not super fancy or frilly, and it doesn't take me very long, and it doesn't take any special drawing skills because I don't have fancy drawing skills. So the way that I do mine, because Sunday is my last day of the week, I do 2 days per page for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday as the end of the week is only 1 to the page. So that's why I've drawn in Sunday here first as my reference point. So I'm going to try to figure out what is the closest Sunday for the beginning of the year. And you'll see in a little while why I use this sort of bar across the top of each day rather than just one line. because later I can come back and I can write hours in there if I want to. I don't every day because I don't have reason for it every day, but when I have a use for it, it's really handy to have that. So there's kind of a bar across the top of these that enables me to write in hours 1 through 12 and 1 through 12. And I use that sometimes. For instance, when my babies were first born, I could mark when their feedings were or when I changed their diapers so that my sleep deprived brain didn't have to keep track of that. You can also use it to circle the times that correspond to appointments that you have on your list or something like that. And here you can see this is how I normally mark my next day on a weekly basis. I just kind of fold that previous page, curl that previous page back, and mark a dot on the next page to indicate where the lines should end, and that's all I need. And there's enough shadowing through the page when you're drawing the ones on the left that you can just line those up. So all I'm doing here is I'm drawing these bars at the top. Again, it's 2 per page, 1 for Sunday. And I draw all of the bars first. This is how I would normally do a week, is to go through and draw all of the bars first. Monday, Tuesday on that first right-hand page. Wednesday, Thursday on the back of the page. This is now Friday, Saturday on that next right-hand page. The Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then now we're at Sunday, so this one is only going to have 1 bar at the top of the page. There's not going to be one halfway down. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to add these flags. And these flags are super simple. Remember, I am not an artist. I do not have good drawing skills, but the graphs make this easy. I move in 1 square from the left end of the bar, and I draw down 3 blocks, and then angle up by 1, and angle down by 1, and then another line straight up to finish it off. And it's super simple, and it's super easy. And even somebody like me who has 0 art skills, like I can barely draw a stick figure, can manage these. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to add all of these. And normally this next step would then flow really smoothly from this and be super fast, but because it's the beginning of the year, it's not. I'm going to write in the numbers for the dates, but in this case, I first have to figure out what those dates are. So I'm looking at January to find what day of the week January begins on. And so I've counted over from that Sunday that we marked to the next part of the week to know where to start with 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, and here we have 5. And then I'm going to turn this sideways and I'm going to write Jan for January to the left, where I left that little space when I made the flags, where I moved over 1 space from the end of the bar. I'm going to write January in all of those until we get back to 1, and then of course I'm going to write December, or DEC for December for the ones prior to that. And we've got December and December. And I'm filling in those dates. This part is not essential, but it kind of can help. And then here I'm writing in Monday, or Mon to Wed, abbreviations for the days of the week in these. It does kind of help to have the last couple of days from the previous year in your calendar the first couple of weeks of the year, because otherwise I find that I'm having to keep pulling my old calendar out to reference it because I can't remember. So there's my first week of daily pages written in. And so here you can see what I'm double checking what day January started on. And we've got those. And here's where, if you want to write these in this bar, I number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to give me the hours from essentially midnight-ish, like the midnight hour through to noon, and then the end of the day. And again, you can use these for all kinds of purposes. I don't use them very often. It doesn't take super long to fill this in if you would use them regularly, if you just use it as a pen. yeah, if you're just using a pen. But if you do use these on a regular basis and you find that's too tedious, I also have had a stamp made that just has the numbers 1 through 12. That's all it is, with spaces in between, and you can just stamp it twice. If you make use of this row of numbers on a daily or near daily basis and don't want to write the numbers out, you can stamp it that way. So this is what we have. We have a year at a glance here in this book. And then we have daily pages. Now we're going to flip from the back, and we're going to count off from the back. I believe it's 22 pages. That will leave us plenty of space at the front for, I think it's 6 months worth of daily pages, along with a couple extra days, because I put a couple of blank pages before each quarter for me to kind of do some quarterly planning. But we're going to start at the back and count forward 22 pages, and this is going to put us to our ongoing to-do section. And this would be for your to-do lists or task lists or context lists or whatever you call those. So I like to washi the outside edge of this page to make it easier to find where the daily section ends and the to-dos start. And that's what this is. So I am just taking a piece of washi tape, and I am just going to run this along the outside right hand edge of this sheet with the washi. Half the width of the washi is on the paper, and half the width of the washi is extending beyond the edge of the paper. I'm going to trim that off. It doesn't have to be perfectly to the bottom and the top of the page, because it's not sealing anything in or anything. It's just a marker. Then I'm going to take that page and I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to fold that washi tape over to the back side of the sheet and stick it down. And this just makes it simple for me to flip to the to-do list section of this booklet at a glance, rather than constantly having to count off pages or number everything or whatever else you might need to do to find this. It also, again, adds a little fun pop of color, and that's nice, and it doesn't require anything super skilled to make that happen. And then I'm going to take another little tiny piece of washi tape, and I'm going to make sort of like a mini tab at the top of the page to give me a little bit of extra something to make this page easy to find. So I've got just a little piece of washi tape. It's maybe like 3/4 of an inch long, and I'm going to put it on not quite half of it attached to the paper, and then I'm going to fold it over with just a little bit of it folding off. So I'm not folding it quite even or smooth or level or whatever you want to call it with the top of the page. It's sticking off just a little bit, so that this to-do section is a little bit easier to find and separate from the daily pages. And that is all we really need to do with this. Now this section, we are going to make, you're looking at my old notebook now, we're going to add an add-in section for the kind of information that you might use over and over again, year after year after year, that you don't want to have to keep rewriting. So it has this page with the slot, and then it has attached to your book, and part of the book is going to be this little flappy pocket sleeve thing that allows this to attach. So that's what we're going to do. So we're moving back to the other booklet, and from the back pocket we're moving toward the front. So I like to set aside a couple sheets of paper that I can use for just testing pens and stuff. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I do. And then you're going to grab 2 sheets of paper together. So you want 2 thicknesses of paper. And I'm referencing my notes here to see what my measurements were. So I'm going to count down. It looks like 8 squares, or about 2 inches from the top of the page, and I'm going to make a mark. And then I think we're going to do the same thing from the bottom. You can alter these measurements a little bit if you want. You just need to make sure that whatever measurements you use are going to match the slit that you cut in the booklet that you make. So now you're going to take both of those sheets of paper together, and using your scissors at the marks that you made, cut from the outside edge of the page all the way into the spine. So when you're done, you should end up with 2 pages that are cut into basically 3 little flaps, as though you were making a flip book. And there should be kind of a narrow one at the top and a narrow one at the bottom, and then a really wide one in the middle. It's a little bit tricky to get that last little bit cut toward the spine, but cut in as close as you can get it to go. And I actually just kind of like pulled on mine and tore the last little bit. So you're going to be working with this wide flap in the middle, and ignore the top and bottom, the little skinny flaps. Just kind of push them out of the way, whichever direction is most out of the way for you. Because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to count out from the spine. And I will put the measurements for this in the description box below, because I don't remember them off the top of my head. But again, you've got 2 sheets of paper thick, and you're now going to be cutting off the outside end of that center flap, both sheets thick. You're going to be cutting that off, so you're making a cut that's vertical along the notebook. So you should now have 2 pages where the center, there's a little flap that's going to be like 2 inches ish, and then you're going to go about halfway down that and cut only one of them. And you'll see this in a moment. I'll show you a little bit more clearly. So you now have 2 flaps, and one is about twice as wide as the other. And you're going to take that flap that's twice as wide as the other and fold it over the narrower one as close to that edge as you can get without smashing it up. Again, you know, those extra pieces at the top and the bottom of the page, just flop them out of your way however you can. So these 2 little flaps, these are going to make the sleeve for something to go through. So put a scrap piece of paper underneath the narrower flap, and we are going to put glue stick glue all along the edges of that flap. Make sure you get the edges really well. And then move your scrap paper behind that, and you're going to do the outside edge of that outer flap, and that'll make sure that you get it stuck all the way to the edge. Now fold that flap, the larger one, the wider one, back over the narrower one, and glue this down as firmly as you can. Double check though, you want to double check to make sure that you did not accidentally glue the ends closed, because it's really important. This should form like a little tunnel, and that tunnel is going to be the mechanism that we use to attach the booklet to the book. So here, I think I'm going to be showing you, yes, that you should be able to insert something in the ends here. So you should have a sealed little tunnel sleeve thing attached to the center of your book. Now you can, I'm going to show you kind of an option here, but I'm not actually going to do it right now. You can take a piece of decorative paper and cover that little sleeve that you made. So you would cut your paper the length of the sleeve and double the width and fold it over and glue it. But again, you want to make sure that when you do that, that you don't accidentally glue the ends shut. And then you want to make sure that your little booklet has a slit in it that's long enough that it will slide over this, because then you're going to take a piece of paper that's just a smidge narrower than that sleeve when folded in half and slip it in, and that's what's going to hold your book in place. It's like a hinge pin in a hinge. Now these extra flaps at the top and the bottom of the page, you can cut them off if you want. I don't recommend that you tear them off, because that will compromise some of the pages at the front of your book, but you can cut them off. Or if you want to, you can glue other paper between them, or like I glued a page protector inside mine and made sure I didn't seal the top of it shut, so it made like a little clear pocket that you can slip stuff inside, but that's up to you. I just decided that I wanted to see if I could make use of those flaps instead of cutting them off, but you don't need them. You can just cut them off if you want to. So you should now have a little removable booklet that you don't have to keep writing and rewriting this stuff. You can just make a new sleeve in your next year's booklet and put that book back in. So we've got our walkthrough. The main booklet has a pocket at the front. It's got my dashboard with my large sticky note. It's got an index to all of my pages. Then we have all 12 of our months. Each one has a space first for me to write down my goals for the month, and then it has the monthly calendar, and then a couple of other pages. You can put a habit tracker here if you want. I usually use one of these pages in advance, like if I'm writing in, if I know, oh, I've got something coming up in February, or I need to do this in February, but it's not really on my to-do list yet, I might write it there. So all of these are the same. Here you can see, here's my birthday. I use these stickers for the birthdays that are for people in our household, and then you can see the other birthdays, they're highlighted, and I'll write the names in, but they don't have stickers, and that just kind of helps me differentiate. And then anniversaries are highlighted in this other color, and the names are written in. And then goals, I have space for my annual goals. I have my 101 things in 1001 days list, but because this one ends before the end of 2025, I've left extra pages so that I can write the next 101 things in 1001 days list. Then I have this folded space for my Christmas plans. I've been using the back of this for a period tracker, largely because it's too narrow for anything else. And then if you flip toward the back, here's the little sleeve that we're going to put that removable booklet into. I've got a couple sheets for testing pens or whatever, and then another pocket. Here I've saved my month at a glance pages that will go in the next binder when we have it. Next book when we have it, notebook when we have it. And then the next notebook has our year at a glance. And you can see that under each one, I then have written in, these are the birth dates and anniversaries. And then below that, I've written in major holiday dates or dates for other major events. Like if there's a wedding or something big like that coming up, I'll write those in. And then I have a couple of pages where I can do quarterly planning. I usually do like a level 10 life type wheel or something like that at the beginning of each quarter. And then we have daily pages. There's the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for each one. Here I will write in week by week the rest of the daily pages, and then we flip over and we have our to-do list, task list area, which for me, I've got low energy and high energy because those are my contexts, because I'm chronically ill. List for things I need help with, things that I need to talk to my husband about, a list for things that are on the the to-buy list, back burner things I want to do eventually but haven't gotten to, a major list of my projects, and then normally I will write in ongoing notes for the major project behind that. So now it's just final things and putting them together. So I have this is the one optional thing that I would strongly recommend. So this is a self-adhesive pocket. I think this one is 3x4. Again, I'll link to those in the bottom of the book. I stick that to the inside of my the inside of the front cover of my front book, and I use that to hold like postage stamps and my payday stickers and stuff like that. You do want to make sure if you're going to put an elasticized pen cover on there that you put it far enough out from the spine that it's not going to be covered up by the elastic, and then it's just as simple as you just peel off the backing and stick this on here. So I have my tab template in there and postage stamps and stickers that I use for us to know when it's our week that we're going to go to the farm to get milk. Now, I hold these together with a large rubber band. You need a really large, strong rubber band, and I put these back to back. So I have the one with the month books in the front and the one with my dailies in the back. And you just put them back to back. So I've got the back of the front books cover and the front of the back books cover, and just slip your rubber band right around them, butt it up against the spine. And then you're probably going to need to tweak your rubber band just to make sure that it's lying flat. But then, as you can see, it holds the books together fairly solidly, so you can pick the whole thing up as a single unit and you don't have notebooks sliding all over the place. I found this to be nice and compact but fairly sturdy. And then you can slip over an elasticized pen holder, either this style with sort of this dipper pouch or the kind that's just like a little pocket you slip stuff in. And this has me good to go. Now, for the cover, I like to label mine with the year with a Sharpie so that I make sure I know what they are later on. You can decorate the front if you want. The first time I did this, I put my word of the year on the front along with the date. And you can see I didn't really decorate anything inside. It's just, that's all I had was my word of the year and the date on the front. This past year, I thought I might put this in an actual cover, which I didn't end up doing, but so I didn't decorate the front. But what I did do is I put my word of the year along with kind of some definitions and scripture verses and things that went to that on clear sticker paper, and I stuck those to the inside of the book. So there are a lot of things that you can do with this in terms of how you do the cover and how you want to decorate it and deck it out and that kind of thing, but it's really pretty basic overall, and it's compact and easy to carry around.